Okay, so we had this scenario about teaching the different kinds of human dwellings using a graphic organizer and how you would use this graphic organizer to teach that concept. So when I first saw this scenario, I kind of broke it. I could see three different ways or three different instances where you would use this particular dwelling graphic organizer to teach. So I'm going to kind of run through those three and how I would use this graphic organizer to teach those specific lessons. So the first one I thought of was like just teaching students the difference between like typical dwellings, like houses, apartments, bungalows, townhouses, like things that they're going to see in their everyday life, especially in younger, like kinder, first grade, when you're teaching those like themed units, especially in kindergarten. You could use this graphic organizer to differentiate between the different kinds of dwellings. So here's our graphic organizer. Sorry, it's on an iPad. Our printer is broken right now, and it's the best I could do. So basically the students would write the type of dwelling, and this, if they're learning, this could be in books they read, like picture books. It could be in, I don't know, you could watch a video about the different kind of dwellings. So they would just like kind of keep track of the different types of dwellings they were learning about, and they would write the name of the dwelling. So like if it was a house, they would write house, and then they could draw a picture or a definition. If we're talking about kindergarten, I think a picture would be more beneficial because it'll give them something to tie that to. Like they will, oh, I remember drawing a picture of a house and this is what it looked like. Or, oh, I remember drawing a picture of an apartment and it's a big building with a bunch of different houses. So just putting it in the words they need or the picture, drawing a picture, whatever way they would best remember it. So for the upper grades with the typical houses, they could just write the definition. This could be done with picture books as well in like second, third, or it could be like during, like if you're reading a certain book and it has the different types of dwellings for humans, you could talk about the difference between them. And then at the bottom, it has the similarity. So you could talk about if they look alike, if the same people live there, all those different kinds of things. So the second way I thought you could, like a lesson you could use this with was like in a social studies unit, maybe about the history of houses and like what they used to look like and what they look like now. They could do some research and they could see in 1950 this is what a house looked like, and in 2020 this is what a house looks like. They could also be thinking of, oh, what kind of dwelling do I live in? What does it look like? What does it look like compared to the old ones? And just there's a ton of different questions you could ask if they could, like prior knowledge. And then something else I thought about with social studies would be like Native American houses or Native American dwellings. So it'd be like a teepee or an adobe or all those different kinds of dwellings, and you could use the same graphic organizer to talk about those things. So you could draw a picture, list the different types, there's various different types, and then give a picture or a definition, who lived there, what kind of Native Americans lived there, all those different kinds of things. And then the third like lesson I could see this graphic organizer being used in was like as a way to see the difference of dwellings in different cultures. For example, like a log house in Northern Europe and a turf house in Iceland. I saw on Google like a ton of different houses that were, or dwellings that were specific to a certain region of the world. So you could learn about a certain region, and you would have your same graphic organizer. You could list the type, what it looks like, what it is, the similarities, and then you could even talk about the similarities and the differences of that particular area's house and the dwelling and the dwellings that we live in Alabama. So I think all three of those would be a great way to, this graphic organizer would help all three of those lessons. And there's a ton more that you could use this graphic organizer with, different subjects, different topics, but basically, I've kind of already talked about this, but the student would just write the different types of dwellings, whether it be about social studies or literature or about themselves. They could talk about what they live in, what compared to what their friends live in. Some people might live in houses, some people might live in apartments. So just whatever types of dwellings you want them to learn about at that particular moment. And then they would draw a picture or a definition to go along with it to help them remember it. And then they would talk about how these dwellings that are listed on here are similar, and you could even talk about the differences differences between what they look like, similarities of what they look like, who lives there, how many people live there, all those various different kinds of things. So I think I remember doing this when I was in school, especially for like the lessons on the Native American houses. You could do like a culminating activity, and the students would be able to refer back to this and the different kinds they learned about, and they could choose a certain dwelling depending on what you're learning about, whether it be Native American or typical houses you see around town or different culture houses. You could choose one, and then you could do research on it. You could have a little project on it, make a poster, or you could even make like a representation using popsicle sticks, or we made, I made a teepee when I was in school. So just giving students different ways to remember these things. But this graphic organizer will help them not only focus on one type, but it will help them focus on all the different types, and like it'll help them organize their information, have similarities and differences. And you can have a different, if you need more room for similarities or differences, it's not very much space. So you could have a different piece of paper, or you could do the back. But I think that this graphic organizer is useful for various different lessons, the 3 I've talked about, and plenty of others, I'm sure.